This is Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby, and you're listening to the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast.
My pillow was wet from teardrops spent. You came to me last night in a dream. Just you and me in familiar places. Our faces were much younger. We were drifting down a dream of memories discovered. No chasing of ghosts. No anxious.
That beautiful song we're just listening to together is from Tristan. It's called Into the Sun. It's from the album Sneaker Waves. The whole album is just beautiful. But I thought that this song was a nice fit for our topic today, which is all about how to deal with a breakup, how to cope with a broken heart, and how to start feeling like yourself again after a really important relationship has ended. Because it's hard, you know? So that's what we're talking about today. If this is your first time listening to the show, hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. I'm the founder and clinical director of Growing Self-Counseling and Coaching, and the host of the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. And this podcast, if this is your first time, this is all about helping you feel good about yourself and your life. It's about helping you have happy relationships and learning how to be a strong, successful person who does good things in the world. And every show is designed around a topic to help you do just that. So, while I speak about many things on this podcast, my background, I'm a licensed in marriage and family therapist. I'm also trained as a psychologist and a life coach, so we can go all over the place with that. But I talk a lot about, relationships, personal growth, career, achievement strategies. I do have a special place in my heart for helping people who are dealing with the pain of a really bad breakup or divorce. I just have a soft spot. And I think that's because, like pretty much everybody else in the world, I myself have also gone through a terrible breakup. And for me, it happened when I was really young. 15, 16, 17 years old was kind of the span of time that it was happening. I was still in high school. But to this day, the pain I experienced during that period of my life was like nothing else I have ever gone through. And I have had a pretty long and interesting life at this point, but that was so hard. And I still remember so clearly how intense that pain was and how inescapable it seemed and how it just impacted every part of not even my life, my being, and also how just helpless I felt to change it. Every day of that life segment was just torture, and it took me a really long time to recover. And I did recover, but looking back, I wish that I had some kind of really meaningful help and support to do that a little bit faster, because it took a long time. And so, I years later, long after that, well into my 20s, I wound up going to counseling school. And at the time, I wasn't sort of consciously set on helping brokenhearted people. I had kind of moved on into other things. But I still think like on some even unconscious level that part of the reason why I have such a passion for helping people is because of that experience and that, to think that I could help people who were going through something similar, that same kind of devastation and heartbreak was really meaningful to me. And so that's part of why I wanted to become a therapist. Even though, ironically, my parents took me to see a counselor when I was in high school, and it was a horrible experience. It was like not useful at all. So, pros and cons. But then I did end up trying therapy again years later with someone who had a different approach, and that was much more useful. So Anyway, so I have a special place in my heart for the brokenhearted. And what is also true is that when I started this work, I worked with individuals and couples, but with brokenhearted people, when I started this, I didn't really know how to help people either. I mean, there's not explicit training that you get in counseling school around this particular topic, right? So, and, I would talk to people that were just absolutely devastated, and certainly I could understand how they were feeling and have compassion for them. But I had little more at my disposal than just empathy and emotional support, which is something, but I didn't really know how to help people move through this and heal this. And because two reasons. First of all, I'm very passionate about what I do. I take this seriously. And I am also a card-carrying nerd, and I love science. I started researching. I started reading studies, tracking down different pieces of information that might help me understand this a little bit better and how to help people. And I started just putting these pieces together around that kind of fit my observations and my own life experience, and answering the questions, why can we get so stuck on certain people? And why is it so hard to let go? And why do we feel so devastated? And what needs to happen in order to be able to heal and really move on? And so, I read everything, experimented with a lot of stuff with my very patient clients. We got there and figured out over years, what worked, what was helpful. And so that research, it turned into a book. The book is called Exaholics, Breaking Your Addiction to an Ex-Love. And then from there, just that book, it turned into an online breakup recovery program called Heal Your Broken Heart. And then, of course, in my practice, as my practice has grown, I have over 20 people on my team now who I work with, my colleagues, but I also offer them, training and supervision specifically around how to help people with breakup recovery, because that's one of the things that we specialize in my practice, Growing Self. And so at this point, I've walked with many people through the process of healing and growth. I supervise many other counselors who do this kind of work. And so I am just really excited to be able to do this with you too, and just kind of offer you some of the same perspective and advice that we share, with programs and books and with our clients in this format, because, as I've mentioned in this podcast before, I like doing this podcast because I know that it connects with a lot of people who might not have access to this kind of information otherwise, and just to think that I'm doing something that could be helpful to somebody else in the world is really genuinely meaningful to me. So thank you for being here and listening to this, and passing this on if you have somebody else in your life that is suffering and could benefit from the same information. And so I have done a number of podcasts on this topic in the past. You can browse through the collection on iTunes or whatever. But I am especially excited about today's show because it is all about you and your breakup questions. So I have people reach out to me all the time with questions, questions for the podcast. People, we have a very active kind of commenting community on various blog posts on the website. People ask questions there. And we also have an online support group where there are a lot of questions going on. And so today I wanted to really take the time to answer as many of these questions as I can, and in the depth that they deserve. If I'm just responding to a comment or something, I think it's hard for me to really give these the time and the attention and the respect that they deserve. So that's what we're doing today. And if you have breakup questions or other questions, relationship questions, general questions for me, you can also ask. You can email me, get in touch with our group, hello@growingself.com. You can get in touch with me through Facebook, facebook.com, Dr. Lisa Bobby. I've dropped the Marie for the sake of minimalism. And also through our website, growingself.com. But Facebook is a good way to get in touch. And speaking of Facebook, while we are on the topic, so if you are going through a bad breakup, or you know somebody else who is and think that they could use some extra support, you or they are invited to join my online breakup support group. It's on Facebook. It's a totally free group. There's no cost associated with it. And also, this is not a therapy group, so I'm not facilitating it. It's not a process group. It's just a peer support group where a lot of really great, compassionate, and wise people are going through the same thing as you might be. And so people are posting about what's going on in their lives and getting some really insightful and compassionate responses and advice from other people who can really understand. And, while I don't want to intrude too much in the conversation, I really want it to be a peer support group. I do look at the posts and responses, and I get a comment from time to time, but I have just been so impressed with the level of wisdom and the heartfelt support that I see members giving to each other. And it's just so heartening, because I think, one of the things that is the hardest sometimes for people going through a bad breakup is that they feel so darn alone, and it's so ironic, because even though everyone has been there at some point in their lives, I think many times people that did the work of healing, it can be hard for them to put themselves back in that place and really understand what it feels like in the time before healing has happened. And so, well-meaning people that love you very, very much also kind of inadvertently shut you down. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so terrible. And they'll say, they weren't good enough for you. You should move on. Just let it go. Start dating, whatever. But there's no space for you just to feel your feelings. And it can feel invalidating. So in this group, people will understand and care about what you're going through. And so, if you'd like to just have this, you're welcome to join. I will tell you, this is a totally secret group, so you can't Google it, you can't find it on Facebook, and I did that to protect everybody's confidentiality. So the only people who can see that you are in the group are other members, and anything that you post is also only viewable by other members. But that also means that in order to join, we actually have to manually add each member, which we're happy to do. It's a little bit of a hack, but your privacy and confidentiality is worth it to me. So if you would like to join, again, please track me down on Facebook / Dr. Lisa Bobby. Send me a message letting me know you'd like to be included, and then either myself or my assistant will add you. So that you can participate. So some of the questions I'm answering on the show today are from members of our group. Others are from people who just reach out to me. And I will want to say I get lots and lots of questions. And so obviously I can't maybe answer each individual one, but because so many aspects of this experience are so universal, and because people going through breakups are experiencing so many of the same things frequently, I tried to choose questions or kind of cluster questions, and then find the ones that I felt like articulated what so many of you were asking about. So even if I haven't been able to use your specific question, I hope that you hear yourself and your situation and your concerns in the words of other people, and then also get your needs met in my answer. So with that, let's jump into your questions. This first one is actually from a voicemail. And on that note, if you ever would like to ask a question that way, you're welcome to. You can leave me a voicemail by calling 720-443-1110. 720-443-1110, and leave me a voicemail that then I can answer directly on an upcoming podcast. But here is the question from a caller I will call N.
A question to answer on the podcast, and mine is, it's been 30 days since we have spoken at all. I guess each relationship is different, so I wish I could tell all the details, but it's basically like we're together every single day for a couple of years, and then it was out of nowhere, like, I can't do this anymore. And then, my whole life is fucking shattered. And then a 1 hour like conversation, and then that's it. Like, there's been no talking. And I have therapists who say that's unhealthy. Like, it's normal to process, whatever. Like, I'm just like, am I just supposed to pretend like this person never existed, and move forward? Or is it healthier to like actually attempt to reach out and have a conversation and be adults, like have some sort of closure to understand more? Or is that going to actually hurt me at this point, because I can't always guarantee his response? I mean, he still has some of my stuff and I have bags of his, but I think that we're both so frightened to face, or he is scared. I think he's out of sight, out of mind is easier for him, that he would let his stuff go. And even though he said he wanted to be friends, he has not reached out to me, and I don't know what's going on. So I'm making myself insane, not knowing what the right thing is to do. Do you try and, I don't know, have more closing conversation? Because right now I feel like I was completely discarded. He never cared. I have all these questions I don't understand. And if it would actually be more healing for me to get those answers and to know that he actually does care, but it just couldn't work for us for whatever reason, versus just feeling completely betrayed and left behind, which is excruciating, when this person was my best friend. So thanks.
What a heartbreaking situation, and just the confusion, like, what just happened? Why did this happen? And so I just want to acknowledge, first of all, what you're going through. I mean, getting blindsided by a breakup makes all of this even harder, because you can't even make sense of the experience, And so many people I talk to, this is not uncommon. I mean, they feel like they're just kind of trucking along. Things are okay. Maybe it's not a perfect relationship, but overall it's fine. It's good. And then their best friend, the person that they are with every day and sharing their life with, just breaks things off. And they don't know why. And it is so hurtful and so confusing. And I just, a lot of people going through this feel the same way you do. Like, did you ever care about me at all? Am I not, worth respecting enough to like tell me what this is even about? Is there anything I can do? I mean, and so the person, in this position, you're left not just in terrible pain, but like with all these questions that are themselves traumatizing when you don't even know what happened. And so, you asked a great question. You asked wonderful questions. So, I mean, what I heard is, should I try to reach out and have a conversation to get some of these questions answered, or would that only be more hurtful to me? And here is the big problem. So let's step away for just a second and look at this from a little bit more perspective. So sure, you can call them up and try to have a closure conversation where you both sit down like grown-ups and say, what happened? What tell me what's going on. And I think that there is this hope that you could sit down maturely over coffee and have a coherent and reasonable answer that was authentic and emotionally intimate, and that having that conversation would be healing and helpful to you, and that you could both walk away from that interaction feeling better. And that is possible. I mean, my gosh, in the counseling room, I help couples all the time have conversations where they are really authentic with each other, and it's respectful and it's constructive. So that can happen. And here's the deal. If your ex was good at communicating, or was brave enough or authentic enough to have those kinds of conversations and be honest and emotionally intimate, you guys would have been having honest conversations about the issues in your relationship before you got blindsided by a breakup. I mean, I think I heard you say something in there, just a little detail. You mentioned almost offhandedly, he'd probably be more comfortable with just like letting his stuff go than actually addressing this. I mean, so just another little clue that your ex may really struggle with that level of authenticity that is required to have those kinds of conversations. And of course, I've never met your ex, that I don't know anything about him. And so I can't, make statements about who he is as a person, certainly. And, I just as a observer and somebody who talks to a lot of people, I mean a lot of people who are really pretty avoidant when it comes to addressing things honestly and openly, and being able to just have that level of intimacy in their conversations. And many times it's because they fear the other person's reaction, for whatever reasons related to their own history. But so instead of being honest and open and brave, they will instead start telling themselves a narrative about how this is the way you are and this relationship is never going to change. And they can really pretty easily convince themselves that the only way to solve the problems in their relationship is to end the relationship and break things off. And now, of course, I have no idea if this was the case with your ex or not. I mean, maybe he was telling you very clearly and explicitly for a long time about the things that he needed you guys to be working on in order to improve the relationship. But the way that you described how surprised you felt by all this makes me doubt that that was happening. And so this is how this relates to your hopes for closure, because even if it is possible to get a fairly avoidant person to sit down with you for a super serious conversation about what happened in the first place, even if they were like, okay, yeah, you would most likely hear things that would not be helpful or meaningful to you. You would be hearing, it's not you, it's me. I'm not in a good place right now. I'm just going through some stuff. Or my favorite, you needed more from me than I was able to give you. Which are all things that an avoidant person probably thinks are better for you to hear, but are really helping them protect themselves from the conflict or anxiety that would come from being straight with you. And so what happens is that when I talk to people that have closure even just the other week, I was talking to a young woman who, had a conversation with her ex of 4 years who just broke up with her kind of out of nowhere, and it really surprised her. And he said these kinds of trite pat things, and she's sitting here telling me, I don't believe a word he said. I know that there was something else going on, because that doesn't make any sense, and sort of kind of like rationally understanding it. And so, when almost always when I have people who try to have closure conversations, they leave them feeling that their needs were not met in that conversation, that it was not an honest, respectful conversation, that their ex is hiding things from them. And they often feel worse after doing that. And they feel angry because now they feel like their ex lied to them from whatever they heard in that closure conversation. And not always. I mean, I'm sure that there are mature people that can sit down and do that together. But the tiny little bit I know about this relationship is making me think that might not be possible with this particular person. So, but you know this person a lot better than I do, obviously. So what my advice for you would be, is if you want to try and have that conversation, do it. I don't know if it will make you feel better or worse. I don't know what will happen. Maybe your ex will be brave enough to be honest and open and vulnerable with you. And I hope that is the experience that you have, and that you walk away from that conversation with new information that helps you feel more resolved about what happened. And if you are pretty sure that that probably won't happen, I would recommend that you sit down with your own wisdom and your own insight and the fact that you knew this person as well as anybody else, and that you know on some level what happened, that I believe that you can trust your judgment and your intuition enough to decide for yourself what the truth really was. I've not ever, I think, had anyone sit in my office and me start asking them those questions that help them tap into their own inner knowing and really genuinely not know why this happened. I think you know the answer. It may be more gratifying to hear it from him, but you don't need him to tell you what happened. You know. And so as a little exercise, you might write that reason out, either in a journal, or if you want to get really fancy, you can write it out as a letter from your ex explaining to you why they really broke up with you. And whatever you write about or journal about will probably be a much more honest and accurate answer than anything you'll ever hear in real life. And you deserve that. You might not ever get closure from your ex, but you can create closure for yourself by doing this kind of inner work. And as for the stuff exchange, again, I think it can be really tempting to think that there might be some kind of meaningful moment between the two of you as you're exchanging garbage bags full of unwashed clothing and toiletries. But in my experience, it is usually just awkward and disappointing, and one person is like, why did this happen? And getting all tearful. And the other person is like, I gotta go. And for both people, particularly the person who's really hurting, it can result in days, if not weeks, of rumination and stewing and, just more kind of obsessive thoughts. And so, again, I trust your judgment. If you need to have that contact, you do what feels best for you. And based on my experience, it may be a less emotionally traumatizing experience for you to just send a simple text saying, hey, when is a good time for me to leave your crap on your porch and for you to anonymously pick it up? And you can put my crap on your porch and I'll grab that while I'm there. If you have a friend who can do that for you, so you don't have to go to your ex's house, that would be even better. And again, it is you deciding that this is done, you deciding that you are limiting your exposure to new things that can hurt you and really helping you create a sense of control around this. So that then you can move in to the grieving process, which is different from that, like, what the hell just happened kind of state that you're in now, is that you get to decide what's happening as opposed to him deciding what's happening for you. So those are my thoughts about your situation, N. So anyway, stay in touch. Let me know how all this goes. And I hope that you can move into a more healing phase of this, because right now I'm hearing that it's still just like the shock phase, and that's just such a hard place to be in, and I'm sorry that you're going through it. So now for the next topic. And I get so many questions about this, and so I'm actually going to read you a couple of questions that are pretty representative of what people go through, and then we'll discuss. And this is around, how do I handle the new kind of layer of pain and trauma and obsession that happens when my ex is seeing a new person? This first question is from an email. My relationship of 4 years ended about 7 months ago. It was mutual, and it ended after a big fight that we had. We'd been on the rocks for many months, and this fight pushed us over the edge. As with all of my breakups, I've been the reluctant one to move on, something about my attachment style. Although deep down, I have a lot of logical evidence to back up why we should break up, my heart really struggles to let go. The first 5 months or so were incredibly hard. I tried to do my best with a mix of grieving, getting out with friends, allowing myself to wallow, and then putting myself first. And part of that was choosing not to date. So after a time period, I decided it was time to really move forward and stop living in the past, so I reluctantly pushed myself into online dating. Although I wasn't sure if this was the healthiest way to deal, I found the distraction incredibly helpful in moving me forward and helping me stop obsess about my ex. Over the next couple of months, I found myself returning to normal and becoming happy again. Then a week ago, I went out with some friends. We were drinking up at a bar, and a friend of a friend, for some reason, brought up my ex's profile on Facebook. My ex and I had decided to go absolutely no contact many months ago, as well as block each other on anything social media, so I haven't seen or heard anything he is up to. I thought I was ready, and I'd accepted the fact that he'd most likely moved on, but when I saw the happy pictures of him and his new girlfriend, I slid back to where my recovery was many months ago. Seeing this brought up so much anger. Like, how could he move on so fast? Why isn't he struggling like me? And also sadness, as in, did I mean nothing to him? And not to mention, it was the holidays, so the fact that I'm alone and that he's able to keep going like nothing happened has really affected me. Now I'm mad at myself for letting myself be affected by this so late on when he is able to move on to his new happy life without ever looking back. I'm not sure what my question is, but I'm really struggling with the fact that before I knew he was with someone, I was fine and moving on. But now I know he's in a happy relationship, I feel like a failure. I'm embarrassed that I'm still alone, and now I feel like none of the work and happiness I acquired recently means anything. I guess my question is, how do I not let his status affect how I feel about myself? Amazing question, isn't it? And I wanted to include this because you just did such a nice job articulating your story and really what this feels like for you. And also, I think you're bringing up something that is so true for so many people is this kind of feeling of becoming unglued to a degree when we know that our ex has attached to a new person. And so before I answer this, I'm going to read you one more question that is very much along the same lines, but I think adds even another dimension of understanding to this experience. So another person got in touch and said, I just found out that my ex broke up with me. My ex who broke up with me to be single is now already in a relationship with someone else. The kicker is that this girl that he's now seeing is no good. She's super young. She's an alcoholic, like she's been to rehab for it. She can't keep a job. She is known to get around with guys. I know that she cheated on her ex. She is not a good person. And all they do every single night is go to the bar and drink. And here she's sort of wondering to herself, I guess she must be an enabler who lets him be an alcoholic, whereas I didn't. She says, it's hard on me, but it makes me feel worthless, like I wasn't enough, and then this loser is. I guess they deserve each other. I don't know why he said he wanted to be single and then just shortly thereafter started dating her seriously. To make things worse, I found out he was having sex with this girl like a week after we broke up. My friend was out with them this past weekend, and anytime the girl that my ex was dating walked away, he would say bad things about her. Yet it's just shortly thereafter, and he's changed his Facebook status to officially dating. And she goes on to just talk about how, just heartbroken she is about how this person that she was dating is already in a new relationship, but with a person who is so, in her view, not a good person, like the complete opposite of her. She drinks, does drugs, gets around, and how this has, she says, goes on another place, I can't stop blaming myself and feeling like she's better than me, and I just feel lost. How do I cope with this? And so I probably have 10 more questions from people who are going through similar things, and that they are really, really struggling emotionally after learning that their ex has moved on and is seeing someone new. And in that second question, I wanted to include this because in this situation, like objectively, intellectually, it could be easy to say, wow, that's really surprising. That is not a good person. And gosh, I don't think I would want to be with somebody who would date a person like that. But that is not actually what happens to people. That no matter who your ex is actually dating after you, there is still this like visceral response to that information that is deeply impacting to your self-esteem. And I think what you heard in both of these stories that I related is that the most painful part for both of these people is that the knowledge of their ex being with somebody new has made them, it damaged their confidence in themselves. It made them question their value, and it also makes them feel ashamed because it feels like it has derailed them so much. And on some level, it's like you can kind of hear this part of them. I think the first question actually said this explicitly, like, I was fine. Like, why is this impacting me the way that it is? Or with the second one, like, this person is no good. Why am I feeling like crap about myself now? And so the first point here, even though for many people going through a breakup, you might be craving information about your ex on some level. I mean, I think you heard that in N's voicemail, like, I want to know what's happening. There's this kind of craving for information. It is very rarely actually helpful to get it, because it frequently, especially if you learned from your ex, I actually fell in love with somebody else. It makes it worse for you. And it also leads to this continued rumination and obsession that then perpetuates your attachment. So even if you had been doing a good job of setting boundaries and limiting your exposure to painful information, like in the case of the first questioner, and then you kind of got ambushed by new information from a air quote friend, which that does not sound helpful at all. So first of all, that was not a kind thing for that person to do. But just as an aside to the first writer, it may be helpful going forward to ask people around you to support you in your recovery by respecting your boundaries. But there's also this other part of us that kind of wants to know, that has this kind of like desire for information, even though it is often painful. And so while there's this curiosity, it's typically a good idea to limit it, in respect for the second person, setting boundaries around Facebook so that you're not actually like seeing pictures, and, knowing what Facebook status is, I think would be very helpful for you just in general. But let's talk more generally. Because, going back to this point that you're both asking around, why do I feel so crazy and devastated after learning that my ex is with someone new? Why has this impacted my self-esteem so enormously? What is happening, and how do I stop this? One of the most important things that I learned from all my research into the science behind breakups has to do with our evolutionary biology, and actually the survival drives that are really running the show behind of a lot of the breakup experience. So quick summary. Let's jump into the science here for just a second to give you a context of what I'm going to share. As a human being, you were designed to bond on a literally physiological level with one person. And it is literally a matter of survival of the species that this bonding happens. And now, while this might not compute when we view attachment bonding through the lens of modern life, liking somebody, having similar interests, and, nobody is objectively going to die if they're not partnered, typically in our modern world. When you see your experience in love through the lens of survival of our species, it starts to change your perspective, because through that lens, your life is actually on the line, or someone's is, if partnerships fail. For example, from the moment you were born, you were primed to bond with your primary caregiver. Now, if a newborn baby didn't have a parent who is going to ferociously bond with it at a primal level, that baby will not have someone who is motivated to carry it around all the time, make eye contact, talk to it, feed it, change it, wake up all freaking night, play with it, and be compassionate with it, instead of ignoring it or throwing it across a room when it cried, right? And so that kind of primal bonding is what is required to meet a baby's needs consistently, so that that baby is able to grow and develop normally. Because, if a newborn baby is neglected, if it doesn't literally die, which it could, it will not develop normally. Cognitively, its brain does not develop properly, and certainly emotionally, it does not develop properly. So we have to bond to babies. Babies need to bond to adults, and adults need to bond to babies. But the other thing here is that similarly, although different obviously as an adult, but still in a very similar kind of way, using similar systems, adult humans must bond with each other on that deep of a level for our species to survive from a biological standpoint. So imagine prehistoric times, 20,000 years ago, that a child or three was born without a very strong pair bond between two partners, or at least without a devoted family group who was strongly bonded to the woman and her children, that it may have been literally impossible for one person individually to care for children, to provide for children, to find enough food to feed the children without the support of a partner or of a community. And so because we rely so profoundly on our attachment bonds to keep people close to us, again, from a prehistoric level, in order to collectively meet our basic needs for things like food, shelter, safety, right? Humans are not the most ferocious animals in the natural environment, that our ability to survive and exist, against wolves and bears and stuff has a lot to do with our collective nature. So human beings are a collective species for whom, until extremely recently in the course of history, relied on the strength of attachments in pair bonds, or to their tribe or group, or the parent-child bond, in order to literally survive. And so when those bonds break, or even more threatening, potentially, you are being replaced by someone else, your partner, your tribe has fallen in love with another person and doesn't need you anymore, it is doing more than just messing with your self-esteem or your self-concept or making you feel sad on a primitive, primal level that is deeper than any of our conscious awareness. It is triggering yours and activating these survival systems that are there to save your life. They are connected to your basic survival. as a human. And I know that this doesn't kind of compute when we're in our modern world, like seeing a photo of your ex with a new person on Facebook or learning that they've moved on quickly with a questionable new person is intellectually not a matter of life or death. But you guys asked me, why do I feel like I'm losing my mind over this? And it's because from a survival of the species, core survival drive part of yourself, it's like you are not getting enough oxygen, or you're out in the wilderness and the temperature is dropping and you're at risk of freezing to death. From that primal level, being replaced by a rival is the equivalent to a life or death situation. And so what that means is when your survival drives get activated, you feel like you're going bananas, because every primal instinct inside of you that is not conscious, this is not thought, these are not your conscious minds. This is like on the level of, I'm really hungry, and if I don't eat something right now, I'm like going to pass out kind of thing. It's something that your body just does. So this is way deeper than this human thoughtful part of us. But every primal instinct inside of you is screaming at you to do whatever it takes to reattach, even if it means debasing yourself, even if it means begging potentially. And you wouldn't do that because, like, intellectually, you're like, no, I don't want to do that. But primally, that's how it feels. And so think about these experiences that you're having. You're feeling horrible. You're thinking about it all the time. You're questioning yourself, losing your self-esteem, experiencing yourself as worthless. These are all actually pretty good survival strategies if your literal life depends on your being taken back by a partner or by a group. Because when you feel like a worm, you're not going to fight with people or get all uppity or difficult or aggressive. You're going to go back to your little sod hut and sit in a corner with your head down and be grateful for the half-rotten turnip that somebody throws at you. And you're going to accept the fact that you are a detestable worm and meekly make yourself useful by cleaning up after everyone or grinding corn for 10 hours a day without complaining about it. And of course, to us shocking humans, this sounds horrible and demeaning, and I'd rather die or whatever. But on a life or death level, this is an excellent survival strategy if your other option is literally just freeze or starve to death or get eaten by a lion or a wolf or something. And literally from tens of thousands, 100,000 years, this was our collective reality. Even a few hundred years ago, this was the truth, especially, and I hate to say this, but especially for women. And so now, in our modern world, even though you are perfectly capable of supporting yourself and you're not going to freeze or get eaten by a wild animal if your ex is now partnered with somebody on Facebook, or if you're rejected or replaced, that's not going to happen. But you are still hardwired to react like you're about to die when that threat is on the horizon. And your body responds to that on a physiological level, making you obsess, making you feel like crap, making you doubt yourself, making you angry, and triggering this intense desire of loss and fear and grief and pain that is very potentially motivating to reconnect. So I am offering this science-based information as a way of helping you understand the deep core processes that are at work inside of you, so that you're not beating yourself up for feeling so crazed about this. Because, I mean, this is just one of many very primal survival drive-based forces at work inside of you, inside of all of us, that are much, much stronger than our conscious mind is even aware of. These are all running deep, deep, deep down inside of us. If you would like some more information about just some of these survival drives. Like, don't just take my word for it. There is a podcast that I'm a big fan of. It's called The Hidden Brain. And on a number of those different shows, the host has talked to different researchers who illuminates the power of these unconscious parts of ourselves and how much of an impact they can have on our daily life without it ever even being part of our conscious mind, influencing the way we feel, influencing the way that we behave. And it's very eye-opening that, we humans, we're very confident in our own abilities to make independent decisions and that we have control over our mind. And to a degree, that's true. But boy, there's a lot more there. So check out The Hidden Brain if you want to learn more about that. So developing an appreciation, I think, for these other forces at work inside of you is an important step in healing. Paradoxically, because I know all this probably sounds crazy when I'm describing it, but I think that in itself is the problem, and why kind of educating yourself around these realities of the human experience is so helpful, is because people, all of us, we think that we have more control over these automatic feelings than we actually do. And then we feel ashamed then when we have them. And it's because oftentimes the feelings really don't make sense from the point of view of our logical mind. So, when we're in these situations and we get this primal power of our survival drives activated and feel all, panicky and terrible. And also that's combined with the patently addictive nature of romantic relationships and attachment, which you may have heard me talk about in other podcasts. Both of those things combined together, it creates this emotional storm inside of you whenever your attachment is threatened or broken. Even if it's not a good relationship, and even if it really makes no logical sense at all. But think about it. Think about people that you've known or your own experience who have maybe stayed for years in a bad relationship. Or, the classic examples of people who stay in abusive relationships. And sometimes there are, material reasons for that. But sometimes it's because whenever they do try to go, these feelings that you're having get activated and pull them right back in. Or that why we can all stay really stuck emotionally on exes when logically and rationally those were relationships that needed to end. But it doesn't compute on an intellectual level. And that's why you cannot think your way out of this problem, because when you line it all up, you'll be like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. But I feel this way. Why do I feel this way? And so it's exactly because of this where there's that disconnect between what we sort of know to be true and how we're actually feeling that is often so discombobulating for people, because they're having these feelings that don't make sense and then they shame themselves for it. And like with both of these questions that I read to you, the first person was like, I was over it. I was moving on. I was okay. What happened to me? And the second person is like, these are like bottom feeders. Like, why am I comparing myself to these people in such an unfavorable way? Because I should be feeling the opposite. And so you can hear this really unspoken but poignant question in both of these, which is, I'm feeling things that don't make sense. So what is wrong with me is what both of these people are really, really saying. And so I'm going to say something now that is going to be very un-Oprah-like and might go against everything that you've heard from pop psychology. But you cannot always trust your feelings. Not all feelings are reliable sources of information about how you should be, right? So think about a heroin addict who is going through withdrawal, okay? Imagine, train spotting or writhing around on the bed. They literally feel with every fiber of their being that if they don't get a fix or whatever, they're going to die. And that is absolutely true for them in that moment. That is how they feel. But objectively, we can all rationally understand from a distance that they need to fight through those feelings in order to be free. It's the same with you. So to get a hold of the big picture and understand that I am having feelings that are a withdrawal / survival drive phenomenon that I don't need to take a lot of information from or do anything with. I don't need to act on these feelings. Instead, I need to hold my course and make conscious decisions to act from my values instead of your feelings. And then doing the follow-up work and going through the stages of healing that I talk a lot about in my program. So, working through grief as a discrete thing, working through anger, trying to find forgiveness for yourself and your ex, really rebuilding self-esteem. Those are all activities that harness the power of your conscious mind and strengthen it so that you can then work with your conscious mind to overcome these sort of distress signals that are coming from these more primal parts of you that you shouldn't listen to in this case. But that said, the path to healing this is to, first of all, understand what is happening to you on that primal level and why you're feeling unglued by just educating yourself around it. I write about these processes extensively in my book, Exaholics, Breaking Your Addiction to an Ex-Love. And if you're like a science nerd like me and want to just know more, check that out. And it'll help you, I think, just have more empathy and understanding for your experience. But then the path to healing is, in addition to that self-awareness, being able to then coach yourself through those moments and back into a sense of safety. Because even though your conscious mind is not the only player here, it is what we have to work with, because these are unconscious automatic survival drives that kind of, roar into being. But we can still use our conscious mind to help us understand what's happening and get back into a sense of safety. So consciously reminding yourself that you are okay, like on a basic safety level, like I'm warm enough, I have food, I'm alive, I'm not in danger. Talking back to that panicked part of yourself is actually key in just helping yourself kind of relax physiologically, as is staying in the present moment, observing the feelings that are happening inside of you and these reactions as they come up. And also, as you do that, being able to understand in an intellectual sense that these are actually artifacts of survival drives that you don't have a lot of control over, and that are also not actually reliable sources of information about your actual reality in this modern world. So on that, things that we routinely teach our clients in our practice or through our programs is how to cultivate cognitive and behavioral skills that they can use then to kind of counterbalance these automatic survival drive type feelings. And part of that is learning how to cultivate mindfulness skills that help them deal with these natural responses. And then also cognitive behavioral techniques that help them feel more in control. So again, while these are automatic reactions that are going to come up no matter what you do, intentionally cultivating mindfulness skills, doing the work of, intentionally rebuilding your self-esteem and self-worth, and then empowering yourself with an intentional sense of control and using the power of your mind to gain mastery over this is essential. But I think also giving yourself the opportunity to walk through the process of healing and grieving and learning how to release the anger, release the guilt, repair your self-esteem. These are all skills and actually kind of discrete aspects of the healing process that sometimes, these like the pain of just the survival drives can motivate you to do that work, and that ultimately you can grow through this experience and get some distance from it. So So, and while all these skills are obviously beyond the scope of a podcast, if you want more help with this, you might consider checking out our Heal Your Broken Heart online program that can walk you through this process step by step and teach you some of these skills. But in the meantime, I hope that just understanding what's actually happening inside of you helps you feel a little bit less like you're going crazy and more like, okay, so this is the emotional equivalent of me feeling really hungry because it's, happening on that kind of level, and being able to coach yourself through it in a constructive way can help you. And, believe it or not, and it's so hard when I have people who are going through this experience, when I work with people who at the end of the day arrive at the end of this process because they've done the work, and they're able to feel at a certain point, maybe not neutral about their exes moving on, but they are able to feel resolved about it. In the best situations, I work with people who arrive at this place of forgiveness and compassion, who have come to genuinely feel glad for themselves that they have been released from a situation that really didn't give them the love and respect that they deserved, but that also feel good that their exes have moved on too. But in order to be able to do that, you need to have certain skills and mindsets and opportunities to do kinds of work that can help you disengage from that primal survival drive part of yourself into this other part of your mind that you empower to have more control. Because if you're at the mercy of those survival drives, it just feels so painful and disempowering. So anyway, and I know it's hard to believe when you're in that state and these forces are so active inside of you that it can feel differently. But I hope that just some of these ideas, even though I know they're kind of big ideas, have given you a bit of a roadmap as to where to go in order to kind of calm that down and be able to be less reactive about this situation and more empowered to feel really okay with all of it, so that you get to move on in a really authentic and heartfelt way, because you deserve that. You deserve that too. So now, with all of this in mind, let's hear the next question. Dr. Lisa, I'm going through a really tough time. My boyfriend and I broke up a year ago, but since we were from the same office, same process, and same floor, we still get to see each other. It was hard moving on because of that. At times we would talk and get far from just talking, and quite get far from just talking, but we never really got back together. And I'm not sure if that means that there was some hooking up happening. I don't know. Anyway, I would cry most of the time because I see him and I miss him, but I can't be with him anymore. Then recently, I saw him with a new girl who happened to be from his team. He was flirting with her, and it was so hard to bear seeing them every day. I would cry every night, dreading the fact that I get to see them the next day. The worst thing is that he doesn't care if I see him getting close to her. I could not accept the fact that he moved on to a new girl. It drives me crazy to think that she could be the one for him. I feel unworthy. It's so traumatic to see him doing things for another girl that he used to do for me. I looked for another job, but I haven't had luck yet. I try to avoid them. But now I think I'm developing anxiety, panics, and depression. I can't eat, I can't sleep, and I just cry at home after work. I'm so tired of trying, and I don't know what else to do. So, going back to the context of what we were just talking about, anytime that your love, your ex-love, who you are still attached to emotionally, even though intellectually you broke up, has connected with someone else, you're being replaced by a rival, all these survival drives flare into action and make you feel terrible and crazy and obsessed and awful, so that it just happens. But what you are describing in your question, so this is pretty much the worst case scenario for any breakup, is being trapped in a situation where you have continued contact, not just with your ex, but with your ex being with a new person. It is so traumatizing. And you'd be amazed at how often this happens, because people start, they date a coworker or a neighbor or their brother's best friend, people with whom there's this proximity situation that when the relationships don't work out, basically it can result in people getting emotionally tortured for extended periods of time. And again, think about how hard it was in the last couple of situations we heard. People just having the simple knowledge that their exes are with something new is making them go out of their mind, but they don't actually have to be in the same room with it every day. And so I think the worst part of situations like this one is that people feel really trapped. They feel like they can't protect themselves from this continual trauma. And trauma might sound like a dramatic word for this, but I think that it fits. And personal disclosure here. So I mentioned at the start of this podcast that the reason that I have such a soft heart and so much understanding for people going through these experiences was due to my own terrible experience. And again, it happened to me when I was a kid in high school, but it had elements of this last story. So my ex wound up getting together with my former best friend who lived across the street from me. And of course, we all went to the same school. So I had to be in classes with these people and was, witness to their comings and goings, even when I wasn't in school. And it was just this assault every single day of new traumatic information. And what I've learned since then is that part of the healing process and the recovery process is being able to create boundaries for yourself from this painful situation, so that you can heal inside of yourself. And when you're in a place where you literally can't do that, it's like it just rips the wounds open over and over and over again. And like you don't have that time and space to heal and recover. And it's really hard. And what we know from research into trauma is that post-traumatic stress disorder, so being really deeply impacted by threatening or dangerous life events, is actually correlated with perceptions of control, as well as whether or not you're re-victimized. So, for example, even going back to World War I, right, when there was first awareness developing of what was then called shell shock, it was observed that soldiers flying around in planes, like zooming around and able to control their movements or get away from harm or whatever, were much less likely to develop symptoms of shell shock or PTSD than soldiers in the same battle, but who had been assigned to hot air balloons. And so the second group of soldiers, instead of zooming around and able to steer themselves different places, they were simply hanging suspended over the battlefield in wicker baskets. Or maybe not wicker, I don't know, but still just floating in the sky, getting shot at, basically, and having, I'm sure their person right next to them getting shot out and not being able to get away from that situation. And then when they got back from that, they were not okay psychologically. And so I think that this situation of feeling trapped in this traumatic emotional space, just being stuck day to day, getting traumatized over and over again by there's your ex and it's so painful and I feel like I'm dying and my ex is with somebody new and I have to see it over and over again. It is the emotional and relational equivalent of being trapped in a hot air balloon and getting shot at by the Germans. So now the good news for you is that you are an adult and you have options. Even though it doesn't feel like you have options, you have options. You can look for a different job. You can move to a different town. You have control over where you live and what you do. And even if you choose not to do something differently, As an adult, you are exercising the power to make that choice, to stay in that situation. So my recommendation to you is twofold. First of all, that you do everything in your power to create boundaries. And the second is that you actively take charge of your perception of control. So with regards to boundaries and control, and I'm sure you've thought through this, but let's just brainstorm. I mean, can you talk to your boss about moving to a different part of the organization or potentially changing your schedule, working from home sometimes? Are there opportunities to limit your contact with these people? And in your personal life, can you fill your free time with things that help you create that sense of distance, little road trips, go camping on the weekends, just something, so that you're able to change your environment and cultivate a sense of safety and distance outside of your job. So even if it is only for 2 or 3 days, you have some respite from that. And then the second piece of this is, in addition to setting boundaries where you can, is cultivating a sense of control, even if you decide not to change your circumstances. So imagine for a moment that you, as is true for all of us, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You do not have to go to work tomorrow. As a matter of fact, if you're at your desk right now, you can stand up and walk out of there whenever you want. You are free to go. You can pull the fire alarm on the way out, just like the rebel in the 1980s teen movie. You don't have to pay your rent. You don't have to pay your mortgage. You can literally, right this very second, stand up, go home, throw some clothes in the back of your car. You can drive to a different state. You can drive to a state where your friend lives and live in her basement for the next 3 months. You could rent a room somewhere and start all over again. You could take all the money out of your savings account and buy a camper van and live in that and just hit the road and go find a quiet campground in the middle of Idaho and just live there and grow your beard. You can do any of these things, literally. Anything. Now, there might be consequences to these decisions. You might damage your credit. You could go into debt. It could be harder for you to continue in your chosen career path. But you won't die. You will not. You can get a different job in a restaurant or retail or doing something to pay the bills, and you will start all over again. And so now when I said all of this, your automatic response might have been, no, I can't do that. That's totally irresponsible. That is foolish. That's dumb. No, I'm not that kind of person. And those are your values piping up that say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to live that way. I have too much invested here. I'll lose my 401k. I want to have health insurance. Whatever. There are reasons. And But those are not rules. Those are not, you're not in a prison cell. Those are your values saying, it is actually more important to me to stay here in this situation for all of these reasons than it is for me to exercise my control to leave this situation. And that is 100% okay, because you're exercising your choice to stay. You are consciously saying, the pain that I feel day to day about being in this environment is actually a better choice for me than letting go of this job right now and making major changes in my life. But it totally changes the frame when you are consciously getting up every morning and saying, I am choosing to do this today because it is worth it to me, rather than feeling like a victim. And so the point of this exercise is not about what you do or don't do. It's that you feel like you're making a choice to be there and understanding on a conscious level that you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You're choosing what you want to do because this feels like the healthiest decision for you right now. And it could also be that, you're saying, okay, I'm going to do this today, but this is not a long-term sustainable plan for me. But for the moment, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to buy myself some time, and I'm going to be very motivated to move heaven and earth and spend my weekends firing off resumes and networking and doing whatever I have to do to change this. That's okay too, but you're not a victim. You have control, you have choices, and you can really do whatever you want. Consciously being aware of that as you go through your day is a powerful psychological buffer. Even if it doesn't change your circumstances, it can change your feeling of empowerment and control. And so I hope that you think about that and maybe consider trying it just to help you get through this really patently, objectively difficult time. Because you're not in a hot air balloon, you're in an airplane. And right now you are circling over that field over and over. Just remind yourself of that. Okay. So guys, I have so many more questions from people, and I'm sad that we can't talk through all of them because there are just so many wonderful questions. I am going to hang on to everything that you guys have sent in. There are a few other sorts of variants of questions that we didn't get to today, but I'm hoping that we can do this again on another upcoming episode. Now, if you have questions for the podcast around breakups or really any other topic, please get in touch with me. You can leave a voicemail for me, again, 720-443-1110. You can track me down on Facebook.com/Dr. Lisa Bobby. You can get in touch with me through my website, growingself.com. And while you're on the website, you can take advantage of the other free resources that I have for you around breakups or relationships or all kinds of stuff. We have online quizzes. We have interactive videos. You can sign up to get information. We have lots of articles on the blog around all kinds of topics, breakups, relationships, career, and more. You can also watch the first video of my Heal Your Broken Heart program. That's again at growingself.com, or you can find it at breakup-recovery.com. And as always, if you found this podcast to be valuable, it would mean so much if you would subscribe to it, review it on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts, because your review will help someone else find this show in their time of need. And that is what this is all about. So on behalf of them, thank you for your support. So I will be back in touch with you in a couple of weeks with another episode of the podcast. But until then, thank you so much for your questions. Keep them coming. And I'll be back in touch soon. Okay, bye-bye.
Places, our faces were much younger. We were drifting down a dream of memories discovered. No chasing of ghosts, no anxious clamor, no notion of how we would sing or how our love would stammer. No premonition of tumultuous water or how the sea would part and carry my love into the sun. The sun's come.